The first thing Kang Min-jae noticed was the silence. Not the soft, satisfied quiet of a home finally settling after days in a hospital. Not the kind of hush that came when a newborn at last surrendered to sleep. This silence was wrong. It sat too still inside the Seoul penthouse, heavy in the hallway, as if the air itself had been told not to move. Min-jae walked faster, his dress, shoes tapping sharp against marble. He told himself he was tired. He told himself the staff were simply being careful. He told himself the baby was probably with the nanny. Then he pushed open the nursery door and felt something inside him drop, so hard it seemed to pull the world down with it. The crib was empty. The pale gray blanket, custom-made, embroidered with the Kang family crest, was folded into a perfect square on the mattress, centered like an offering. The mobile above it spun slowly, turning on its own, little moons and stars rotating as if nothing had happened. Min-jae's eyes swept the room like a man trying to force reality to change by staring at it. No baby, no nanny, no Zuri. Only a faint scent of shea butter and vanilla. Zuri's scent, still lingering in the air like a memory that hadn't accepted it was over. His throat tightened. He backed out into the hallway and barked a single name that made the staff freeze wherever they were. Manager Han. Footsteps rushed. A house manager appeared, bowing too quickly, face already damp with fear. Sir. Min-jae held up one hand, palm out, not to calm anyone, but to stop the world from moving forward until it returned what it had taken. Where's my son? The manager blinked rapidly. Sir, he was here. This morning he was. Min-jae's voice cut like metal. Where is my wife? The manager swallowed, eyes darting to the side. Madam, we thought she was resting. Min-jae stepped past him and strode into the master bedroom. The bed was made. Two-made. Crisp corners, pillows aligned like a hotel display. The walk-in closet had gaps in it. Small gaps, but deliberate. Not a frantic grab. Not a panicked run. A selection. Then he saw it. On the dresser, beside his watch case, lay a single sheet of paper in a thin plastic sleeve. A signature page. His signature below. The lawyer's stamp. And above his, in calm, steady ink, the name he had demanded 41 hours after she gave birth. Zuri N. Okoye Kang. No shaking. No smudging. No pleading. Just a neat, controlled line of letters. Min-jae stared so long his eyes began to sting, as if the paper were emitting heat. He had forced her to sign away her future, and she had signed. Then she had disappeared without a word. No note. No apology. No dramatic speech he could use later to paint her as emotional, ungrateful, unstable. Nothing. Min-jae's phone was already in his hand. His thumb hovered over contacts, security, lawyers, drivers, his mother, like prayer beads for men who worship control. He dialed his head of security, voice low, dangerous, carefully contained. Bring everyone. Lock down the building. Check the cameras. Find her. His eyes drifted back to the empty closet space, to the folded blanket in the nursery, to the signature page that suddenly felt less like a victory and more like a trap he had stepped into with both feet. Because men like Kang Min-jae did not get left. Men like him decided when people came and went. And yet the proof was in his house. A woman had obeyed him perfectly and still escaped. It hadn't started with the missing crib. It had started the day Min-jae saw her in Itaewon and decided she was going to be his. Back then, Zuri Okoye was not the quiet, polished wife who smiled beside him at charity functions, her skin glowing under cameras, her accent softened from years of learning how to be understood in rooms that were not built for her. Back then, she was fire-wrapped in calm. She had moved to South Korea for graduate school, chasing a scholarship and a dream she had built with her mother's prayers and her own stubbornness. She worked part-time at a cultural center, helped translate for newly arrived Africans, and argued with professors who assumed her silence meant ignorance. She laughed loudly. She dressed boldly. She refused to apologize for taking up space. Min-jae noticed her because she did not notice him. He was already important, young executive, Kang family name, the kind of man who stepped out of black cars and made people straighten their backs without understanding why. He had power with a quiet, polished edge, the smile that promised comfort, the eyes that warned of consequences. Zuri was outside a cafe, balancing a tray of drinks for a group of visiting students, when Min-jae brushed past, and a cup tipped. Coffee splashed onto his expensive coat. People around them gasped as if Zuri had committed a crime. Zuri froze for half a second, then set the tray down and reached for napkins. "I'm sorry," she said in Korean. Clear, respectful, but not afraid. Min-jae looked at the stain, then at her face. She didn't lower her eyes. She didn't beg. She simply waited like a person who believed mistakes were human, not punishable. That belief offended him in a way he couldn't explain and intrigued him in the same breath. He expected her to crumble when he spoke coldly. Instead, she met his gaze and said, "I'll pay for the cleaning." Min-jae's lips curved. "Do you know who I am?" Zuri blinked once, then answered honestly, "No." A few people actually inhaled in shock, as if she had slapped him. Min-jae felt something hot twist inside his chest. Not anger, not exactly. Possession. He had spent his life being recognized, measured, flattered, feared. To be unknown was rare. To be unknown by a woman like her felt unacceptable. He asked her name. She gave it. He asked where she was from. She told him. He offered his card like it was a gift. "If you need help with anything," he said, "call." Zuri glanced at the card. She didn't take it immediately. Then she did, but only because refusing would make a scene she didn't want. As she walked away, Min-jae watched her and told himself it was nothing. 2 days later, he showed up at the cultural center where she worked, claiming he wanted to donate to international student support. Zuri saw him and understood at once. This was not charity. This was pursuit. She tried to keep it professional. She introduced him to the director. She thanked him politely. She avoided being alone with him. Min-jae kept appearing anyway. A book she mentioned once arrived at the center with a note. A doctor appointment became easier when she struggled with insurance. A landlord who had been rude suddenly became cooperative. Min-jae never demanded gratitude, which made the help feel like kindness instead of leverage. Zuri was smart. She knew what this was. She had seen men like him in Lagos and Accra and Johannesburg too. Men who wrapped control in generosity until you didn't know where the gift ended and the trap began. But she was tired. She was alone. And Min-jae was patient in the way dangerous men could be patient. He listened just enough. He laughed at her jokes. He used her name with care. He asked about her mother. He made her feel seen. And being seen, after years of being overlooked or fetishized, was intoxicating. When he finally asked her out, he did it softly, like he was giving her a choice. Zuri told herself she could handle a date. One date wasn't surrender. But Min-jae didn't date like regular men. He curated. He chose a restaurant with a private room so no one could interrupt. He arranged flowers in her favorite colors, as if he had memorized her. He spoke about her work like it mattered. He touched her wrist once, lightly, and it felt like warmth. Zuri's instincts warned her. Her loneliness argued back. And so she let herself fall, carefully at first, then faster, because Min-jae made falling feel safe. For a while it was. They traveled. They ate street food at midnight. He showed her hidden corners of Seoul most tourists never saw. He defended her when strangers stared too long, when a cashier addressed him instead of her. Zuri told herself, "See? He's different." Then he introduced her to his family. That was when she learned the truth. Min-jae's love had walls, and those walls had rules. His mother, Madame Kong, greeted Zuri with a smile that never reached her eyes. She complimented Zuri's Korean, then suggested, sweetly, that Zuri should avoid drawing attention by wearing bright colors. His aunt asked if Zuri planned to return to Africa after graduation, as if Zuri were a visiting intern, not a person building a life. His cousins stared at Zuri's hair like it was a curiosity. One asked to touch it. Another whispered something about exotic. Min-jae didn't stop them. He laughed lightly, as if it were all harmless. On the drive home, Zuri told him she felt uncomfortable. Min-jae's hands stayed steady on the steering wheel. "They need time," he said. "You need to understand our culture." Zuri looked at him. "I do understand culture. I also understand disrespect." Min-jae's jaw tightened. "Don't turn everything into a problem, Zuri." The words sounded small, but they were the first crack. After that, small things shifted. Min-jae started correcting how she spoke in public. He suggested she soften her accent. He asked her to stop posting certain photos because people might misunderstand. He framed everything as protection. He never called it control. When she got a job offer from an international NGO, Min-jae's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You don't need to work so hard," he told her. "If we marry, you won't have to worry." Zuri laughed, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. He proposed not long after, and he did it with cameras present, an elegant rooftop event, fairy lights, a violinist playing softly in the background. Zuri's friends squealed. Her co-workers filmed. People in the room shouted yes before she even spoke. Zuri smiled because everyone was watching. She said yes because she loved him and because the world was already celebrating the answer. When she moved into his world fully, the air changed. The penthouse was beautiful, but it felt like a showroom. The staff were polite but watchful. The security guards greeted Min-jae like a commander. Zuri's life slowly became a schedule managed by other people. At first, she convinced herself it was normal. Wealth had systems. Power had routines. Then she realized the systems were not for comfort. They were for surveillance. Min-jae began checking her phone openly, smiling like it was intimacy. "We have nothing to hide," he said. He started choosing her outfits for events. "This color is better," he'd insist. "This neckline is too much." Then he would kiss her cheek as if his approval were affection. When she pushed back, he grew colder. "I'm trying to help you fit in," he said. "You don't understand how people talk." Zuri knew how people talked. She was the one they talked about. When she got pregnant, she expected relief, maybe even softness from him. Instead, his control tightened. He hired a private obstetrician. He chose a hospital known for discretion and VIP rooms. He added extra security for safety. He told Zuri to stop working so much because stress was bad for the baby. Zuri tried to keep her NGO role. She tried to keep her friends. Min-jae smiled and said, "After the baby." After the baby became a phrase that swallowed everything. After the baby, she could visit her friends again. After the baby, she could travel to see her mother. After the baby, she could return to work. But the baby was always approaching, always close enough to justify her waiting. In her 7th month, Zuri asked Min-jae if they could visit Nigeria to see her mother before the birth. Min-jae's eyes hardened. "Absolutely not." Zuri stared at him. "Why? Your country is not stable," he said simply, as if he were reading a report. "And I will not risk my wife and child for sentiment." Zuri's voice stayed calm. "It is not my country. It is my home." Min-jae's mouth tightened. "Your home is here now." Something in Zuri went still, because she understood exactly what he meant. Not that her home was with him, that her home was wherever he placed her. And then she did what she had learned to do in his world. She got quiet. She stopped arguing about small things. She smiled more at dinners. She nodded more at his mother's comments. She made her body softer in public, her voice gentler, her opinions smaller. Min-jae relaxed, believing the pregnancy had tamed her. He didn't see what she did in private. He didn't notice the way she saved screenshots and forwarded them to an email he didn't know existed. He didn't see her hiding cash in books she knew he'd never touch. He didn't realize she had made friends with one of the night nurses during prenatal checkups, an older woman named Mrs. Park who had kind eyes and a quiet way of observing everything. He didn't know Zuri had visited her embassy under the excuse of renewing paperwork and had asked careful questions about legal support for mothers in cross-cultural marriages. He assumed Zuri was too dependent to plan. That assumption was the first real mistake he made. The second mistake came 41 hours after she gave birth. Labor tore through Zuri like a storm. She had imagined pain. She had read about pain. This was different. This was her body splitting and rebuilding itself in real time, her mind drifting between screams and prayer, her hands gripping sheets so tightly her nails left crescents in her palms. Min-jae stayed in the room when staff were present. He held her hand for photographs. He whispered encouragement in a voice meant to sound caring. When Zuri vomited from pain, he stepped back. When she begged him not to leave, he said, "I'm here," but his phone kept lighting up with messages he could not ignore. It was not cruelty in the dramatic sense. It was something colder. Priority. When the baby finally came, a boy, tiny and furious, his cry sharp enough to cut through fog, Zuri sobbed with a love so sudden it felt like being hit. She held him to her chest and felt her entire life rearrange itself around that warm, fragile weight. Min-jae looked at the baby and smiled like a man staring at a trophy that had arrived on time. "A son," he said with satisfaction. Zuri stared at her child's face. The baby's eyes were squeezed shut, his lips searching for milk, his hands twitching like he was reaching for the world. Zuri whispered a name into his hair that no one else heard, a name that belonged to her. For a day and a half, Her world became feeding and bleeding and drifting in and out of exhaustion. Nurses checked her stitches, her blood pressure, her temperature. Her body ached in places she had never known existed. She barely noticed the passing hours until Min-jae returned with a folder. Two men followed him into the private recovery room, a lawyer in a clean suit, and a security guard whose presence made the air feel smaller. Zuri knew what the folder meant before it was opened. Min-jae's voice was gentle. "You did well," he told her, as if childbirth were a performance he had commissioned. Zuri didn't answer. She adjusted her baby against her chest. The lawyer set the folder down on the table and slid it forward like a meal served hot. "What is that?" Zuri asked, though her stomach already knew. Min-jae smiled. "Paperwork. Standard." Zuri opened it with slow hands, her fingers still shaky from exhaustion and pain. Her eyes moved across legal language in Korean and English, too polished, too careful. The words were clean, but they cut. It was an agreement that would strip her of financial security if she ever left. It would restrict her access to marital assets. It would limit her ability to travel with the child. It would grant Min-jae broad custody control in the event of separation. It also included a clause about immigration sponsorship that made her blood run cold. Zuri read it again, jaw tight. "This says I waive my rights," she said quietly. Min-jae's smile didn't move. "It says we protect our family." Zuri looked up at him. "This isn't protection." The lawyer cleared his throat softly, eyes avoiding hers. "Madam, it is for stability." "Stability," Zuri repeated, tasting the lie like bitter medicine. Min-jae leaned closer. His voice dropped. "You've been restless lately," he said softly, as if discussing the weather. "Talking too much to people who don't understand our family. This ends that." Zuri's heart hammered. She kept her arms firm around the baby. "If I don't sign?" she asked. Min-jae's eyes flicked to the infant. "Then you will learn how quickly things can change for you here." Zuri's mouth went dry. "Is that a threat?" Min-jae's expression stayed smooth. "It's reality. You're not in your country. You're not alone by accident. You're here because I brought you here." The security guard shifted slightly by the door, and the movement felt like punctuation. Zuri's mind raced. Refuse and risk escalation. Scream and risk being labeled hysterical, postpartum, unstable. Exactly the story Min-jae's mother would enjoy telling. Call a nurse and risk the nurse calling the wrong security, the wrong administrator. Min-jae had chosen this hospital for discretion. Discretion was a weapon now. Zuri stared at the pen placed neatly on the table. It looked harmless. Min-jae waited with the patience of a man who believed her answer was already decided. And then Zuri did the thing Min-jae had always underestimated about her. She got still. Her face went blank, not from surrender, but from calculation. She lowered her eyes. She let her shoulders drop as if defeat had finally arrived. Min-jae exhaled, satisfied, mistaking her silence for obedience. Zuri picked up the pen. The baby stirred against her chest, a small whimper. Zuri kissed his forehead and whispered something in English so low only he could hear. "Hold on." Then she signed. Zuri N. Okoye-kong. Her handwriting was steady. Min-jae's shoulders loosened. He took the paper from the lawyer and glanced at the signature like a man checking a lock after closing a door. "Good," he murmured, and the softness in his voice made it uglier. "Now we can move forward." Zuri nodded once. Min-jae believed he had won. He didn't understand what her calm meant. He didn't see the way her eyes had gone distant, not broken, but cold. He didn't know that in the same moment she signed, she made a promise to herself that was stronger than any legal ink. She would leave, and she would take her son, and she would never give Min-jae the satisfaction of a goodbye. When the men finally left her room, Zuri stared at the closed door for a long time. Her body hurt. Her breasts ached. Her blood still came in slow, cruel reminders that birth was not over just because the baby had arrived. But she had never been clearer. She pressed her cheek to her son's head and breathed him in. "I will not let them own us," she whispered. That night, when the corridor lights dimmed and the hospital quieted into the tired hush of late hours, Zuri waited. She watched staff movements. She listened to footsteps. She learned the rhythm of the night like it was a song. Mrs. Park, the older nurse Zuri had befriended months earlier, came in to check her vitals. She spoke gently, the way tired nurses did when they were trying to keep patients calm. Zuri's throat tightened. The moment felt like stepping off a cliff. "Nurse," she whispered. "I need help." Mrs. Park paused, her hand still on the clipboard. Her eyes sharpened. Help with what? Zuri swallowed. My husband made me sign something. He threatened me. He brought security into my room. I can't go home with him. Mrs. Park didn't gasp. She didn't dramatize it. Her face changed in a quiet, serious way, as if something she suspected had finally spoken aloud. She glanced toward the door, then back at Zuri. Do you want to leave now? She asked. Zuri's eyes filled, but she didn't let tears fall. Yes. Mrs. Park nodded once. Then listen carefully. Do not panic. Do not call anyone. I will return. She left. Zuri sat very still, heart pounding so loud she thought the baby might hear it. Her hands shook as she adjusted the blanket around her son. When Mrs. Park returned, she wasn't alone. A night supervisor entered with her, short hair, calm voice, authority in her posture. She listened as Zuri spoke, stopping only to ask precise questions. Were there threats? Was there coercion? Did Zuri feel safe? Zuri answered quietly. No. The supervisor's jaw tightened. Then you are not going home with him. Zuri blinked, a weak surge of disbelief and relief mixing in her chest. You can do that. We can document, the supervisor said. We can discharge discreetly. We can arrange safe transport. But you must understand, this will become difficult. Zuri's voice was small but steady. My life is already difficult. The supervisor nodded. Then we moved quickly. They moved like people who understood that safety was sometimes built in minutes. They dressed Zuri in plain scrubs so she looked like staff. They wrapped the baby in an unmarked hospital blanket. They avoided the main elevator and used a service corridor that smelled of laundry and antiseptic. The supervisor pressed a small envelope into Zuri's hand. Medical copies, she said. And my number. If anyone calls you, don't answer. Let a lawyer answer. Zuri's throat tightened. I don't have a lawyer. The supervisor's eyes narrowed with practical seriousness. Then get one before morning. At the service exit, an older van waited. Unmarked, not the kind of vehicle Minjae's security would be scanning for. The driver didn't ask questions. He simply nodded once and opened the door. Zuri sat in the back seat with her son pressed to her chest, her body trembling not from cold, but from the shock of what she was doing. As the van pulled away, she looked back at the hospital lights. Somewhere inside, Minjae's lawyer was probably filing the signed document like a trophy. Zuri touched her baby's cheek with her fingertip. We're leaving, she whispered. We're leaving. Minjae discovered it in the morning, not because anyone told him directly, but because control always demanded updates, and he couldn't tolerate not knowing where his wife and child were. He called the hospital with a calm voice, asking for discharge timing. The receptionist hesitated, then said, Sir, Madam has been discharged. Minjae's pause was sharp. Discharged by who? I'm sorry, sir. We cannot. Put the supervisor on the line. When the administrator came on, the voice was polite but guarded. The more Minjae pushed, the more the conversation turned into a wall. Walls made him furious. He drove to the hospital, security with him, jaw clenched so hard it hurt. He demanded names, threatened lawsuits, threatened donations, threatened the careers of people who had done nothing except refuse to obey him. But there was paperwork now, documentation, a confidential discharge, a recorded complaint, and even in a system that bent for the powerful, hospitals feared scandal. Minjae left with nothing but rage and an emptiness blooming in his chest that did not feel like defeat. It felt like something worse. Uncertainty. He returned to the penthouse and ordered lockdowns. He ordered camera reviews. He ordered staff interrogations. But Zuri had prepared in ways he hadn't imagined. She had left her phone behind in the hospital room, powered on, location active, bait that would keep his trackers busy while she moved. She had already arranged a small stash of cash weeks earlier and hidden it inside a baby diaper package nobody ever opened, because Minjae's staff preferred to use the expensive supplies he bought in bulk. She had already memorized which staff members were loyal to Madame Kong and which were simply employed. And she had already built a quiet lifeline through the African community in Seoul. Women who had survived things they didn't talk about loudly. Women who understood that marriage problems could become life problems. Within hours of leaving the hospital, Zuri was inside a small apartment above a salon in Itaewon, the kind of place Minjae would never set foot in because it didn't flatter his image. The building smelled like hair products and fried food and life. The neighbors were loud. The walls were thin. The curtains were old. Zuri felt safer there than she had ever felt in the penthouse. Her body screamed with pain every time she stood. She was still bleeding. Her breasts leaked unexpectedly. She cried without warning, then got angry at herself for crying, then cried again because anger and exhaustion were tangled together. Her son slept in a borrowed bassinet, his tiny mouth making soft sounds as if he were dreaming of milk. Zuri watched him breathe and felt something fierce settle into her bones. Min-jae would not raise her child as a Kong possession, not in a house where love was measured in obedience. A woman named Abina, Ghanaian, older, voice like iron wrapped in kindness, sat beside Zuri and handed her warm soup. "You did the right thing," Abina said. Zuri's eyes burned. "I don't know what I did. I just left." Abina nodded slowly. "Sometimes leaving is the bravest plan." Zuri swallowed. "He'll look for me." Abina's mouth tightened. "Let him look. We will not hand you over." Zuri's breath shook. "He has lawyers, power, money." Abina leaned closer. "And you have truth. And you have women who are tired of watching men like him win." Zuri closed her eyes for a second, letting the words sink in like medicine. That evening, an attorney arrived. Korean, mid-40s, sharp eyes, no softness in her posture. Her name was Choi Seo-yeon. She didn't waste time with sympathy. She sat at the small kitchen table, opened her bag, and said, "Tell me everything." Slowly. "Exactly." Zuri spoke through a throat tight with exhaustion. She described the control, the threats, the isolation, the document, the hospital. Seo-yeon listened without interrupting. When Zuri finished, Seo-yeon asked one question. "Did you record him?" Zuri hesitated. "Not in the hospital. But I have voice notes. Messages. A recording from months ago. He said things." Seo-yeon nodded. "Good." Zuri blinked. "Good. It means he's not only powerful," Seo-yeon said calmly. "He's careless. Powerful men become careless. They think nobody will ever play back their own words." Zuri's hands trembled as she looked down at her baby. "He made me sign away my future." Seo-yeon's gaze sharpened. "He made you sign under coercion while you were postpartum in a hospital room with his security present. That matters." Zuri's chest tightened. "It matters enough?" Seo-yeon leaned forward. "It matters if we move smart. Not emotional. Smart. We will file for emergency protection. We will challenge the agreement. We will document the coercion. And we will control the story before the Kong family controls it." Zuri's mouth went dry. "How do I control a story against people like them?" Seo-yeon's voice stayed level. "By refusing silence." Zuri stared at her sleeping son, then whispered, "He will destroy me." Seo-yeon's expression didn't soften. "He will try? But that's not the same as succeeding." Zuri's phone buzzed, an unknown number. Then another. Then another. Min-jae's people, already searching. Abina took the phone and powered it off completely. "No more," she said. Zuri swallowed. Her voice came out small. "What if he finds this place?" Seo-yeon stood. "He won't. Not tonight. But we will move you again anyway." Zuri's eyes widened. "Again?" Seo-yeon nodded. "The first hiding place is never the last. The first place is just where you catch your breath. Then you disappear properly." Zuri's heart hammered. She had imagined escaping. She had not imagined the logistics of staying gone. That night, while her baby slept, Zuri transferred evidence into secure storage. Screenshots of messages, voice recordings, dates, notes she had typed and hidden in drafts. Her fingers shook, not from fear alone, but from the strange grief of realizing she was building a case against the man she had once loved. She didn't let herself think about the early days, the midnight street food, the soft laughter, the illusion. She focused on facts, because facts were armor. Somewhere in the city, Min-jae was hunting. In the penthouse, he paced like a caged animal, barking orders into phones. His head of security, Lee Do-hyun, stood near the door, calm in the way men were calm when they had done darker work before. "Find her," Min-jae said. "No matter what it costs." Do-hyun hesitated. "Sir, she has the baby." "Yes," Min-jae snapped, as if the fact itself were an insult. "And if she goes to court?" "She won't," Min-jae cut in. "Because I have her signature." He didn't speak like a man hoping. He spoke like a man holding a weapon. Do-hyun nodded, but his eyes carried a flicker of caution. "We will locate her." Min-jae's jaw clenched. "I don't want locating. I want returning." Do-hyun didn't argue. He simply left. already making calls. Min-jae sat down at his desk and stared at the signature page again. He had wanted certainty. He had wanted a legal chain around Zuri's life. Now the same paper felt like a dare, because Zuri had signed like a woman who knew something he didn't, and that unsettled him more than rage. On the second day, Seo-yeon moved Zuri to a safer location, outside central Seoul, to an apartment owned by a friend who didn't ask questions. The building had tighter security, fewer curious neighbors, and a parking garage where Zuri could enter unseen. Zuri's body still ached. She felt weak, dizzy sometimes. She moved slowly, careful with stitches and exhaustion. But fear kept her upright. In the quiet hours, Abina sat with her and taught her how to swaddle the baby tighter, how to hold him so he stopped crying, how to recognize hunger versus discomfort. Zuri felt tears rise more than once from the simplest kindness. She had lived in luxury and felt alone. Now she was hiding, and she had a community. Late that night, after the baby finally slept, Zuri stared at the ceiling and felt the weight of the open questions hanging over her like hooks. How long could she hide? Would the court believe her? Would they laugh at the idea of a powerful Korean man coercing a foreign wife? Would they call her dramatic? Would they call her unstable? Would they take her baby away? Her chest tightened so hard it hurt. Abina, sensing the spiral, spoke softly from the chair beside her. "Don't let your mind run ahead of your feet," she said. "You can only walk today." Zuri swallowed. "Today feels like a war." Abina nodded. "That means you're alive. If the story has you locked in right now, if you're feeling that tight chest panic with Zuri, if you're already imagining what Min-jae will do when he realizes she's not coming back, this is your reminder to plug into Afro-K Ruthless love stories. Subscribe so you don't miss the next Ruthless twist. Like the video so YouTube pushes it to more people. Comment what you think Zuri should do next, and share it with a friend who loves high-stakes love stories. And after this ends, go watch the other videos on this channel too, because every story here comes with teeth. Min-jae's search began with the obvious. He called Zuri's few known friends. He contacted the cultural center. He contacted her old co-workers. He sent quiet pressure to the African student groups he had once pretended to support. When people said they didn't know, Min-jae's patience snapped into something sharper. He moved to intimidation. A cultural center director received a visit from two men in suits who smiled without warmth. A friend's workplace got a routine inspection. A salon owner in Itaewon was questioned aggressively about foreign women who came and went. Min-jae's influence moved like smoke. Everywhere, invisible until it burned your eyes. And then he did what powerful men always did when they couldn't find the truth. He created a story. He had his PR team prepare a statement. Zuri was experiencing postpartum instability. Zuri had run away in confusion. Min-jae was a concerned husband, desperate to protect his wife and son, asking for privacy. Madam Kong helped push the narrative through social circles. The foreign wife was emotional, ungrateful, unreliable. This was why you didn't marry outside. This was why you needed a woman who understood obedience. Zuri saw the rumors through an encrypted link Seo-yeon sent her. Her stomach turned. "They're calling me unstable," she whispered. Seo-yeon's expression didn't change. "Of course they are. That's the easiest way to discredit a new mother." Zuri's hands tightened on the blanket. "What do we do?" Seo-yeon's eyes were steady. "We file first. We speak second. We show evidence third. We don't let them set the frame." Zuri swallowed. "If I speak publicly, I'll become a target." "You already are," Seo-yeon said. The words landed like a slap, but they were true. Seo-yeon filed emergency motions, protective orders, temporary custody arrangements, and a legal challenge against the postpartum agreement on grounds of coercion and undue influence. She included the hospital's confidential documentation and statements from staff willing to speak carefully. Then, she prepared Zuri for the next step. "Do you want to expose him?" Seo-yeon asked. Zuri looked down at her baby. His tiny mouth opened and closed in sleep, like he was tasting dreams. Zuri's voice shook. "I want him to stop." Seo-yeon nodded. "Then we turn on the lights." They contacted a journalist known for investigative work, someone not easily bought by the Kong name. The journalist agreed to hear Zuri's side, but only if there was verifiable documentation. Seo-yeon provided what she could without compromising the court case. Zuri added what she had saved: messages, recordings, patterns. They crafted a statement that was controlled, not emotional. Precise, not melodramatic. Zuri's hands shook as she read it aloud in a rehearsal. I was pressured 41 hours after giving birth to sign documents that would limit my rights and control my ability to protect my child. Her voice cracked on the word child. Seo-Yun stopped her gently. Again, she said. Slower. Breathe. Remember, you are not begging. You are stating facts. Zuri swallowed and tried again, voice steadier. When the story broke, it broke like glass. It spread faster than Min-jae's people could contain. Some outlets framed it cautiously. Others seized the scandal. Social media exploded with arguments, some calling Zuri a liar, others calling Min-jae a monster, many debating the ugly reality of power imbalance and xenophobia in cross-cultural marriages. The most damaging part was not Zuri's statement. It was the audio clip. Min-jae's voice, low, calm, threatening, saying months earlier, "You will never leave me with my child. I will make sure you regret it." It wasn't the exact same threat Zuri remembered in her bones, but it carried the same cold ownership. And ownership sounded ugly when played back without charm. Min-jae was in a meeting when his assistant showed him the article. He read the headline once, twice, then felt heat rush up his neck. His jaw clenched so hard it hurt. He stood so quickly his chair scraped. "What is this?" he demanded, but the room was already staring. A donor cleared his throat. A colleague avoided eye contact. Someone's phone buzzed with the same link. Min-jae forced a smile and tried to laugh. "My wife is confused," he said smoothly. "This is unfortunate." But the sound of his own voice in the recording made his stomach twist. Because he couldn't charm audio. He couldn't intimidate a clip already shared 1,000 times. He left the meeting early, face tight, hands shaking with rage. At home, Madame Kong was waiting, her posture rigid, her eyes sharp. "This is humiliation," she said, voice icy. "How could you let her do this?" Min-jae's voice was low. She was never supposed to have leverage. Madame Kang's mouth tightened. "Then take the child. End this." Min-jae's eyes darkened. "I will." His head of security, Do Hyun, hesitated when Min-jae ordered a private retrieval. "Sir," he said carefully, "with the media watching, any attempt to take the baby by force will look like kidnapping." Min-jae's laugh was humorless. "He is my son." Do Hyun's eyes flicked with cautious calculation. "The law will not care how you feel. It will care what can be proven." Min-jae leaned forward. "Then prove what I want proven." Do Hyun nodded, but something in him shifted. He could smell risk. He could smell a powerful man beginning to spiral, and spiraling men made security chiefs nervous. Meanwhile, Zuri lived between dread and determination. She still woke at odd hours, convinced she heard footsteps. She still flinched when unknown numbers tried to reach her. She still felt her body healing too slowly, as if pain was the price of freedom. But each day, she also felt something growing. Confidence. Not confidence that she would win easily. Confidence that she would not surrender. Seo-Yun prepared her for court, drilling her on details so she would not be shaken by aggressive questioning. "What time did he enter your room? Who was with him? What exactly did he say?" Zuri answered, again and again, until the memory no longer made her voice tremble. On the day of the hearing, Zuri entered the courthouse through a side entrance. She held her baby close, heart pounding, her skin prickling with awareness. Min-jae arrived through the front like a man performing normality. He wore a tailored suit. His face was controlled. His lawyers surrounded him like armor. When Zuri saw him across the hall, a familiar fear rose. Then her son shifted in her arms, warm and real. Zuri's spine straightened. Inside the courtroom, Seo-Yun spoke with quiet force. She laid out the timeline, 41 hours postpartum. A hospital room. A folder of legal documents. A foreign wife, physically vulnerable. A husband with security and lawyers. An implied threat involving immigration and custody. Min-jae's lawyer argued that Zuri had signed willingly, that she was emotional, that postpartum women sometimes made irrational decisions, that Min-jae was a devoted father. Seo-Yun didn't flinch. She asked the court to consider coercion, undue influence, and the strategic timing of the agreement. She asked for temporary custody protections. She requested supervised visitation. Then she presented supporting documentation from the hospital, careful, professional, clinical. The judge's expression changed, only slightly, but enough. Min-jae stood to speak, voice smooth. "I have always provided," he said. "I have always protected my wife. I do not understand why she is doing this. Zuri watched him and felt something strange. He looked smaller in court than he did in the penthouse. Not less dangerous, just less divine. Because in court, he wasn't a king. He was a man with claims that needed proof. The judge granted temporary measures. Zuri retained physical custody for now. Min-jae's visitation was supervised and structured, and the postpartum agreement would be reviewed under coercion claims. It wasn't a final victory, but it was a crack. Outside, cameras flashed. People shouted questions. Min-jae's supporters murmured about betrayal and foreign manipulation. Zuri didn't speak. She walked to her car without looking back. That night, Min-jae's rage turned sharp. He told Do-hyun, "We will not wait for the final ruling. We will get my son back." Do-hyun's jaw tightened. "Sir, that will destroy you." Min-jae's eyes burned. "She already destroyed me." Do-hyun hesitated, then nodded like a man choosing survival over loyalty. "We will attempt." But Do-hyun wasn't the only one making moves. Because once Zuri's story went public, other people began to whisper. A former housekeeper, no longer employed by the Kangs, contacted Seo-yeon anonymously. She described nights of shouting behind closed doors, the way Zuri would sit silently afterward with swollen eyes, the way Min-jae's mother spoke about training her like she was a problem to solve. A driver offered testimony about being told to report Zuri's movements. A staff member confirmed that Zuri's phone had been monitored. Each new detail didn't just damage Min-jae's image. It built a pattern, and patterns were harder to dismiss than single accusations. Do-hyun tried to track Zuri during a supervised visitation exchange, but Seo-yeon anticipated it. The location changed last minute. Police were present. A court-appointed supervisor followed protocol strictly. Do-hyun's men watched from a distance, unable to act without becoming the scandal themselves. When Do-hyun reported failure, Min-jae threw a glass across the room, shattering it against marble. "Useless," he shouted. Do-hyun stood still, eyes flat. "Sir, people are watching." Min-jae's breathing was heavy. "I don't care." Do-hyun's voice lowered. "You should. Visibility ruins men like you." Min-jae didn't understand the warning. He was still trying to win like a man who believed the world would bend if he applied enough force. Zuri's case continued for months, measured in court dates and careful steps, in breastfeeding schedules and evidence files, in nights where she rocked her son while reading legal documents and trying not to break. Some days, she felt powerful. Other days, she felt like a shadow of herself. The hardest part wasn't even Min-jae. It was the way strangers talked about her motherhood as if it were public property. The way people argued about whether she deserved protection. The way some women blamed her for marrying him at all, as if love were a contract you could read perfectly before signing. Zuri learned to stop seeking comfort from strangers. She sought it from her community. From Abina, who showed up with food and calm words. From Mrs. Park, who checked on her quietly, risking her job to help. From Seo-yeon, who never promised miracles but always promised strategy. And from her son, who grew day by day, eyes opening wider, fingers gripping her thumb as if anchoring himself in her presence. Eventually, the court reviewed the agreement more deeply. The judge questioned the timing, the circumstances, the presence of security, the imbalance of power. Expert testimony clarified postpartum vulnerability, not as a way to paint Zuri as unstable, but as a way to show how predatory Min-jae's timing had been. Min-jae's lawyers fought hard. They argued signature was signature. They argued marriage meant shared decisions. They argued Zuri was acting out of bitterness. But the evidence kept stacking, and public scrutiny kept pressure on the system. Finally, the ruling came. The agreement was not upheld the way Min-jae intended. The coercion claims damaged its enforceability. Custody favored Zuri as primary caregiver. Min-jae retained visitation under strict conditions meant to protect mother and child. Protective orders remained in place. Min-jae didn't collapse into dramatic ruin. Power rarely evaporated overnight. But he lost what he wanted most: absolute control. On the day Zuri moved into her new home, smaller, quieter, hers, she stood in the doorway with her son in her arms and felt something unfamiliar settle around her. Peace. Not perfect peace. Not the naive peace of believing danger was gone forever. A hard-earned peace. The kind that came from choosing herself even when it cost her everything comfortable. Abina visited first, carrying food and a soft blanket. She looked around the room and nodded, satisfied. This is good, Abina said. This is a beginning. Zuri's eyes burned. I feel like I should be happier. Abina's voice softened. Happiness comes later. First comes safety. Seo-yun arrived later, set her bag down, and gave Zuri a small, rare smile. You did not break, she said. Zuri looked down at her son. He blinked up at her, then reached for her necklace, fingers clumsy and determined. Zuri whispered, I almost did. Seo-yun shook her head. Almost is not broken. That night, when the home was quiet, Zuri sat beside the crib and watched her son sleep. She thought of the signature page Min-jae had treasured like a chain. She thought of how she had signed calmly, not because she surrendered, but because she needed him to believe she had. She thought of the moment she disappeared without a word, and she understood something that made her chest loosen. Silence could be submission, but silence could also be strategy. In the penthouse, Min-jae walked past the nursery and avoided looking inside. Because the emptiness wasn't just a missing wife and child. It was proof that control could fail, that a woman could sign the paper you demanded and still choose her own life. That the moment you think you've won might be the moment she's already gone. And if you stayed with this story all the way to the end, don't let it stop here. Subscribe to Afro-K Ruthless Love Stories for more Afro-Korean narratives where love turns ruthless, secrets surface, and the one everyone underestimates becomes the one nobody can stop. Like the video, comment the exact moment you knew Zuri was already planning her escape, and share this story with someone who lives for high-tension plot twists. Then go watch the other videos on this channel, because the next story might be even more dangerous.